All right. We now are traveling, I guess, back to Toronto, Bill. I think that's where you are located right now. Um, I'm so thrilled to have Bill Burns with us today. I'm not even going to make up an introduction because the way you write your own from your bio, I just have to repeat because it's so Bill Burns. Um, Bill Burns was raised in a book-selling family in Saskatchewan, where he learned about art from monks and poets. His projects about animals, nature, and advanced industry have been shown widely, including at the Seoul Museum of Art, the Institute of Contemporary Arts in London, KW in Berlin, Mendes-Wood DM in Sao Paulo, and the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Bill believes that autoroutes have served us well in protecting the soil, but should now be plowed under to make room for wild birds, flowers, vegetables, and goats. And when I think of Bill's work, I think of many things which are a part of who Bill is. I think of donkeys, I think of salt, I think of parades with big, huge tubas. I think of trade and exchange and companionship systems. I think of feet and hooves on the ground. And of course, his extraordinary drawings. It's a very full world, this world of Bill. And it is a pleasure to have him show some of it here today. So, Bill, thank you. And the basket is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cynthia, and all the other presenters. It's been wonderful afternoon so far. So thanks very much. And I'm going to talk about my projects about trade, which I guess I've been working on them for 5 or 6 years, and I think of it as has a bit of an arc. Like a lot of my projects have an arc where I do projects in performance and film and letterpress printing and drawing and a few other things, and they're kind of diaries about about my life, but also about what I'm trying to make, I guess. So I'll try sharing the screen and see how that works. And so that seems to work. And yeah, so I guess I want to talk about maybe 3 or 4 things that have influenced my practice in this particular project, especially, and then and go through some pictures on the way. And so I was one of the 3 things that I want to mention is I worked up in the north in the Yukon Territory in a small school, and while I was there, I went with students on a science and art project to try and learn from elders in a couple of small villages in the north, and so that was kind of early on in my short teaching career. And when I arrived in villages, I was often given a gift of caribou meat. So it would be like quite a big piece of caribou meat, and I really started to learn to appreciate that the caribou was a very particular kind of being, and also had a spiritual dimension, a geographical dimension, and a historical dimension that was very different than the way I thought about animals and our relations with nature. So that was really kind of something that started me thinking about what this very this gift was more than a gift. It had a lot of dimensions to it that were, and it really got me a little bit out of kilter with my own thinking about what gifts are, what commodities are. And there's been quite a bit of talk today that I've really appreciated about um, economy and commodity form. And I think that's is really the bailiwick of a conceptual artist, is to kind of look at the texture of what things are, and especially the way we trade things. So my conceit of the project is kind of an idea that we would uh, maybe like my idea would be to trade things like salt for timber, and then timber for codfish, and go in a cycle like that. And so far I've done a couple of uh, performance projects where in the Swiss Alps, for instance, I procured a small quantity of salt from the local salt mine, and then I hired two donkeys and their keepers to help us go up the mountain with a load of salt. And when we got to the pasture lands, well, there's levels of pasture lands. There's, the spring and fall levels, and then there's the winter pasture, and then the summer pasture. So there's three levels of pasture lands. And on the way, we stopped at the orchard and traded some salt for apples. And then when we got to the beekeepers, we traded some apples for some honey. And at the top, we ate some. We served some apples with a drizzle of honey and a pinch of salt, and it turned out to be Rosh Hashanah, so it was a kind of a appropriate moment, and so that was one of the first iterations of this project in a kind of practical way, was to make some trades. And so part of the trades are, I guess, well, I consider my documents, which I'm going to show a few drawings, um, I consider them kind of in two forms. One is as a document, and normally I guess in art, drawings aren't considered to be documents. And then the other ones I call pre-documents, which is kind of another idea I have with kind of proposition that they're things to come, but may not be realized yet. And so these are so I often show some of the things that have been important to me, and this kind of salted candy from the Nordic countries is something that I love very much. And also one of the things, another part of my life in the North was that we would have visitors, and they would be from the far north. So I was in the north, quite far north, but there was still, as you know, the world is quite large, and there was still many people living beyond in the far north. And where I came from, there's no in Dawson City in the central Yukon. There's no there's no real there's not really any Inuit people there. There's the First Nations are the Gwich'in people, and that's where the caribou is very significant in their history and husbandry as well. And in the north, there's whaling and other forms. So often a gift would come down from the north in the form of a small piece of whale blubber, which is it's a very also another important gift of which I found interesting too, because um, these are acquired tastes, I guess you'd say, but also very significant as gifts. So, and I should, yeah. So these are some felted sort of ideas of what I make in part of my exhibitions, and also the kind of trading I do. And there's a there's I mentioned I was going to briefly talk about two other uh, parts of my project that are inspirational, and that's um, uh, the idea that the caribou and the whales are have a very important space in the world in the north where I was working, and that segues with these ideas of that Donna Haraway and other writers have been talking about, that we need we need to find ways to repair our damaged world. And so one of the things I believe in, because I grew up in Saskatchewan, and even though I was from a book selling family, I also was close to the farm, and I always felt those connections with the farm and farm animals is important. Just to grow up, and I always have felt kind of lack of that in the big city. So now I live in Toronto, and I've lived in London as well, and you don't see very many farm animals in the city anymore. So, um, one of my goals with this project is to bring animals to the city as well, and because I think that the farm animal can be an interlocutor, like our companion animals as well, can be an interlocutor to the wild, or to nature in general. And another one of my sort of inspirations with this project is a kind of to try and examine what a commodity is, and what you know um, how these things operate, and how trade operates. So um, there's two economists that well, an economist and an anthropologist, I guess. One is Thorsten Veblen. He was the turn of the 19th and 20th century, also a Chicago economist, and he proposed a couple of important things. One was the idea that certain goods, which are now known as Veblen goods, acquired value and became more in demand by virtue of their price. So the higher the price rises on a Veblen good, the more likely it is to sell. So this is antithetical to Fordist and Jeffersonian economics, but it works for luxury goods, like and I'm artists find themselves strangely in this netherland between luxury and not having very much themselves. So that's an interesting proposition. And also a second proposition he made was that we we have this idea of leisure, and that leisure, the kind of demonstration of leisure and the deliberate use of non-productive time is a way of accruing social status and economic status as well. So, so it's again very antithetical to the construction of Fordist economy that we would have, that you would gain status and wealth by deliberately doing nothing. So, or at least deliberately doing something that's not productive, like golfing or yachting, for instance. So those are very curious, and I just find them fascinating that this is something that we do as humans, and that we, you know, there's a kind of admiration, and the structure of our society is built around these kind of strange things. And then there's the anthropologist Arjun Appendurai. He proposes something that I also found very interesting, which is that there's a tension in in every commodity, and the commodities have a social life, and so and the tension of the commodity is that there's it's between knowledge and ignorance, and the knowledge tends to be on the buying end, and the ignorance tends to be on the production end, but not always. But there's this relationship, for instance, if we look at like salt production, which I've been curious about, and you often have salt produced in very impoverished ways, and the industrial aspects of it are incredibly, like you're basically mixing a medieval industrial complex in let's say a desert with pickaxes, with a bespoke commercial enterprises, for instance, a restaurant in Paris. So you have these kind of these this kind of economy that's very stretched out geographically, and that stretching it out geographically gives helps to give power to a certain side of the equation. And so it's this idea that, and I think what Zita was talking about earlier is very pertinent to this, because this kind of this ignorance is what is impoverishing, and it's not a kind of it doesn't mean that people are ignorant of what's going on, but it means that the equation is unequal. So so that's and so those are the kind of aspects of this project that I find interesting. And then my drawings are about the way my own practice operates, and sometimes like diuretic about my daily life. So I've often found my studios were in Marseille, and also in London, and now in Toronto, are next to mosques. So I do hear the call to prayer interestingly. So and then I'm these again, this kind of looking at these dynamics of what of this relationship of what desire is, and what is, and the politics of commodity forms. So I find my brother sent me this article about this 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 camp, refugee camp in the Congo, where there was an art gallery as well as a field hospital and schools. And then this picture is about, these are my two nephews who I recently commissioned to do a small EP based on my donkey walk in the Swiss Alps. So this will be released soon. So I like to make music out of parts of the projects, and my sometimes our projects have run into troubles. In this one, let's see what this one talks about. I can't read the top of the text. Maybe the audience can, but it says that the potatoes spoiled after the crash. In any case, I don't recommend carrying potatoes in a small plane. I think I might have. So again, some of them I think of as documents to the project, and some of them are pre-documents, and so and they talk about the different kind of troubles I've had occasionally. So in my performances in the city, I bring in um, I have a kind of network which I find marvelous, that I've mostly met people through farmers markets. So I have connections with goat keepers and now longer term relations with goat keepers and donkey keepers and beekeepers, and also with shepherds as well, and sheep shearers, and um, so these I think of as a way of building community again, and to think about this establishing a kind of questions about what this kind of tension between knowledge and ignorance might mean. And my brothers and sisters, when I was younger, were usually older than me, off to university, and they would send me books. And so I found this collection of books that they've given me recently, and I made some watercolors about them. And then I think Cynthia, you talked about it. I think all of us have come to, uh, in one way or another, talk about the shrinking commons, and how this is kind of a problem if we want to have a kind of equity and discourse in our society. So these are I think there's questions that I kind of try and bring out through my small texts and in the drawings as well. Um, and and again, the I really I'm really hopeful about cooperation between species, but it's really it's very um, important that we get busy with it. So, and I've been doing some comparisons of different technologies, and this is a salt. Uh, it's a salt. I guess it's a machine that produces, or an apparatus that produces electricity using salt. So I made some electricity in the gallery, and people could charge their phones and the like at the stand. But I won't go into details on that. And then these are these are computers that that help you decide what kind of conveyance you might want to move a load of timber, say from one place to another, or a load, or donkeys, or or salt. So they show capacities, and so you can choose your ship type, and then you can find out what you might be able to move with that kind of ship. So these are kind of rudimentary computers, and I made some paper models of some of my operations as well. And and then I thought I would end with showing a brief. I have a 3-minute film and a 1-minute film, so that of the performance of this. So depending on where we're at with time, you're welcome to show either one. The 3-minute film shows a little bit more of the Georgian chanters that are involved in this performance. And I commissioned my friend Alan Gasser and his group Muchari, who are Georgian chanters in Toronto, to arrange and compose a song based on the 100 largest corporations in the world. So, and then this performance that will be in the video took place at the Oculus Pavilion, which is a modern building, kind of an indoor-outdoor, fully built in the 50s. And to me, the modern architecture within this historical trading place, where there's been, it's in the Humber River Valley, and there's wonderful river and a trail in this area of Toronto, and the trail has been a carrying and trading place for 11,000 or 12,000 years, and so it's called the Toronto carrying place, the area. So maybe if whoever is working on the video, if we want to show either the 3-minute or the 1-minute video, you can decide. Thanks.
Apple Inc., Saudi Arabian Oil Co., Microsoft Corporation, and Amazon.com Inc., Alphabet Inc., Tencent Holdings Limited, Tesla Inc., and Facebook Incorporation, Alibaba Group Holding Limited, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company Limited, and Berkshire Hathaway Inc., Samsung Electronics Company Limited, J.P. Morgan Chase & Co., and Johnson & Johnson.
Thank
So
you, Bill.
yeah, thank you so much.
It has been very moving. I like the sort of intimacy, and then it's about this big, big subject. It's a beautiful sort of contrast even. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And